I'm a second-generation Mormon. My family joined the church in South Africa when I was 11 years of age. I served a mission in South Africa. I went to BYU. I returned home for a summer visit as an undergrad and met my wife, who I had known before back in South Africa. We helped choreograph and perform in Saturday's Warrior there. We courted. That was our courtship, and we married. And when I proposed to her, I told her, you need to know something about me, that I am attracted to men and that I have some issues with that. But I served my mission honorably. I've been going to BYU, and everything in my life is straightforward, and I don't think we're going to have a problem. Now, I told her that, never mind the fact. What I didn't mention is that I had, well, I probably did tell her, but I had had crushes over a number of roommates in all the time I was at Rick's College, which is now BYU, Idaho, and then crushes when I was in the year before our marriage with a couple of roommates. And so we got married, and it was a happy marriage, but even within that first year there were signs. We went to a restaurant one evening and I looked across at another couple sitting nearby us, and it was supposed to be a romantic dinner for us. And I thought everything was okay, and that now that I was married, that the journey was going to be an easy one. Looked across at this other table and saw this amazingly, extraordinarily good-looking man sitting there with his wife, and could not take my eyes off him. I thought, oh gosh, this hasn't gone away. This hasn't gone away.
We're in for it.
So that was the beginning of almost a 25-year marriage and a very difficult journey. And I was unfaithful a number of times to my wife. And you know, this is not the story most gay Mormon men want to tell their fellow members in the church. It's embarrassing, it feels shameful, and a lot of shame is placed upon you. And I've had a lot of pause to think about that, because my ex-wife and I deeply cared about one another, and I would say that I identify as somewhat bisexual, and I think that's an important point to make here, because many gay and lesbian people are uncomfortable with that term, especially when they're Mormon and are first coming out. So the whole concept of bisexuality is a very uncomfortable one for many people, because people don't know where to place that. And for me, human sexuality is on a spectrum. And if only we could realize that it would make everybody's lives so much easier. The problem is, if you're a bisexual young man or young woman and you're growing up in the church, you're already told to be virtuous before marriage and then to be faithful afterwards. And often you marry without any knowledge of how your sexuality is going to unfold. And then suddenly you're there in this marriage, and of course you've been encouraged to marry, because it's not acceptable for you to, in the Mormon faith, to marry somebody of the same sex. And so suddenly you're faced with the fact that you've got these attractions to your own sex, and you're married, and what do you do with them? And for me, that became the biggest issue of my struggle, because at the time the church was telling us that this is something we categorically had overcome. All my efforts at overcoming was not one thing worked. No matter what formula the church gave me and I followed did work. And neither did the counseling with LDS Social Services or trying to go to Evergreen International, an organization indirectly sponsored by the church. And in the end, you know, it was kind of me left to my own devices. Well, you have to figure this out yourself. This is not something that you can comfortably talk about within the church, because it's not encouraged, or with your friends. And for me, it was kind of like the whole thing of Eve taking that apple and saying, if I don't bite into this apple, I'm not going to know what this thing is. And that's what happened for me. Now, there was tremendous shame associated with that, because it happened periodically throughout my marriage. I never was in a relationship of any emotional kind with anybody of the same sex. I kind of drew the boundary lines there, and of course I was continually trying to overcome this thing. And finally, being a dancer and having danced for so many years, and my ex-wife was a dancer too, it kind of sneaked into my unconscious that my lived experience was telling me something about myself, that who I was absolutely fine. There was absolutely nothing wrong with having those feelings and attractions to someone of the same sex. But at that point, there'd been a lot of damage done in my marriage, and my ex-wife and I decided to separate and then eventually to divorce. it caught my children off guard because this was our big family secret. I had been disfellowshipped at some point, and it was kind of like, well, Dad, why don't you do this? Or why aren't you going to church right now? Or why do you feel this way about certain things? And I would say, well, it's because I have a gay brother, because I actually have a brother almost 10 years younger than me who came out, and I was the oldest son trying desperately to hang onto the edge of the cliff so my dad would know no matter what I would stay faithful in the church. And so the truth came out, and initially my two sons were fine. They were out the house. They were pretty much grown up and not really active in the church, so it didn't seem a big deal for them. But my daughter, it hit her the hardest, and I'll let her tell her story maybe a little.
Well, I first came to the idea that my father was gay when I was very young, when I was quite young, 5 or 6 years old. As kids, you sneak through your parents' stuff, and you find things, fun stuff sometimes, and sometimes not so fun. And I found a book that asked the question on the front cover of, "Why am I gay, Lord?" And I didn't quite understand it, and I asked my dad, and he said, well, you know, your uncle's gay, my brother is gay, and I just want to understand him and help him come back to the church and understand himself. And I just took that answer, and I left with it. And years later, years went by, and my parents were going through a separation, and just started to clue in on some things, put pieces together that had caught my attention at a very young age. My brothers and I. My dad was a dancer. He's very fluid in his movements, very graceful, very loving, very comforting, very nurturing. Some things that my mother actually wasn't. And it was funny, but a lot of my friends, their fathers were these straight, hard, never, don't talk to them, don't love them. And so that kind of came to...
More legalistic.
Right. They kind of came to my mind of like, huh, that's interesting. And then I would say, well, my dad's a dancer, and he's in touch with his body and with the human body, so that's why. And as I became a teenager and my parents' separation became very much more realistic to me, things just started to click. And when I found out that my dad was gay, I didn't really find out. It was just like, oh, that's what it was. And I was upset that my dad had been unfaithful to my mother. I was not upset that my dad was gay. I was upset that he had to live a lie and almost feel forced to act out the way that he had to, instead of being able to look into this and understand it before bringing a family and children and all of this weight into the world. What a hard burden to carry. That's all I thought as a teenager. I was upset that my parents were no longer going to be together, that my mother and father were not what I really had imagined or thought for them to be. But ultimately, I was more upset that the first man I ever fell in love with, the man that captured my heart, my father, had to live in a lie, had to live with so much pain. And as his daughter, I couldn't imagine that.
And it's interesting, just the one point, she was homesick one day. My marriage was unwinding. We were separated. We pretty much knew we were in a divorce. And my ex-wife came home and was berating me for various things, and it got into a bit of a heated argument. She didn't realize my daughter was home that day sick from school because we were separated. And my daughter heard things we hadn't had a chance, or I hadn't had a chance to break down to her personally. And of course she was very angry at me, and she and my ex-wife actually came into the living room, which was adjoining the kitchen, and were berating me over things and kind of yelling at me. And I was feeling incredibly humiliated, and I said, well, how many more times do I apologize for things that have happened? You know, I wish things hadn't happened the way they would, but I can't say sorry for the rest of my life. I have to move on with my life. And at that point, they just kept going on and on. I grabbed a knife in the kitchen in the moment of heat and said, is this what you wanted me to do? And I cut at my wrist. And I still have the scars from that. Now, I'm not a suicidal person even remotely. But my level of frustration at being blamed for this whole issue, as though the whole thing fell upon my shoulders, which, yes, okay, one can choose to be faithful or unfaithful, and I understand that. I've been with my partner for 7 years now, and I've had the same temptations, maybe this time towards men, but I have never stepped out and being unfaithful, and probably because I did learn a lesson from my marriage itself, but also because there hasn't been the same pressure. It's kind of that whole weight, with that whole burden lifted off. It was kind of like this amazing sense of freedom and honesty, and no sense of needing to dissemble about who I was in any way at all. But
I think that day was an important day for me, as young as I was, and I didn't want to see that. Of course, there was a weight behind it that made me understand that there was nothing. Because I remember what I had been saying to you was that, how could you do this to Mom? And it wasn't you being gay. It was, how could you do this to Mom? How could you act out? I understand that you're gay, Dad, but why would you go cheat on Mom? You know, I'm a woman, and I could never imagine being cheated on in my young, innocent mind. And the fact that Mom was so, you know, rivaled with this in her emotion, she only added to my misunderstanding of it, possibly, because hers was filled with emotion, you know,
and hurt and anger,
and and all of a lot of emotion, whereas mine was I was trying to understand, you know, I was trying to the reason behind it.
But you were losing your parents too, maybe.
Right,
so,
and so I think there was a huge shift from my blame on you, which was ignorantly based because I had no idea. I wasn't educated on the issue. It shifted from blame to understanding. And for me I was more accepting of hearing you talk to me about, you know, maybe what you and Mom had gone through, even finding out that Mom knew. When I found out that Mom knew, then I started to blame her because I thought, well, you were given the option, you were given the knowledge, and you decided to ignore it and to go on what you wanted to go on, which was that he could fight this and he could overcome this if he tried hard enough. And although you were given the chance, you know, and so I think it was a rough time, but it was a much needed situation to happen, because all of that, instead of me ruling from an emotional base, which I think most people do when this comes out in their family, they just feel, they have a lot of feelings about it, but they don't stop and look and think and then try to understand. I think if it could be approached more like that, a lot of the pain and hurt and anguish wouldn't go on for so many years before the understanding comes into play. The understanding should be the first.
So do you think we could have kept that marriage together?
Honestly,
I mean, if you look back
no,
now,
honestly, no, because not because.
I mean, you know how well we got along together.
I know that. My mother and father love each other still to this day. My mom can't not talk about how handsome my dad is, and my dad can't talk about how much my mother turns him on. So I know that they definitely loved each other, and they definitely were meant to be together for the time being. I think us as humans, though, we want things to be infinite. We want them forever, and sometimes they're just what they are. You had 3 beautiful children, a gay man with 3 beautiful children, and a straight woman who loves the Mormon church. She'll never leave it, and she has 3 beautiful children. With my stepfather, she wouldn't have had those children. She wouldn't have had them raised the way that they were. We wouldn't have the father that we have. So everything. To me, everything happens for a reason, and I don't think that the marriage should be looked at as should it have been saved. I think should it just be looked at for the beauty of what it was in that moment, of those years that you were together, and possibly for her even allowing you to come out and be, it could have been handled differently. But honestly, I think when you deal with somebody that's in a religion that they believe in so much, to want to redefine their belief system would be an uproar in everything that they stand for. And so no, I don't think that marriage, I think if you guys wanted to deny some things and then just go on living, yes, it could have worked, but I don't think it would have been happy and full. I see you and Dwayne together, and I love it because I really see that you are you and he is him. There's no trying to make something because society, because we have even convinced ourselves that this is the way that it should be. You know, I think I much prefer to see you living your separate lives. I much prefer to see Mom being as Mormon as she is and in love with the church and in love with her husband for him being Mormon as well. I love that. And I just as much as I love seeing you and Dwayne. And I love that. I love seeing my dads just as much as my mom and my stepdad, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it should be looked at as something that has to be together.
So I asked you questions. I know we're going to finish this, but you asked me one question that you might have always wanted to ask me.
I always wanted to ask my dad.
What? What?
I'm not going to. Well, I just wonder, and this is from a woman, and I have sex with men. I just wonder.
I don't know if they'll put this in the
Yeah, see, I don't know. It's like, what's it like to have sex with a man, being a man?
Well, actually, you know, that's not a bad question because I have the benefit of having been with a woman and being somewhat bisexual and then being with a man, you know, but now a man. And, you know, frankly, it's not really that different.
Is it like in straight relationships? Because I know I have this in my relationship, even with my lover, which is based completely on a sexual interaction, is that it's not actually the sex. It's more or less this joining, this understanding, this.
Yeah, I think every single relationship gets
no matter
past
what.
the sex part with anybody who's a little bit sane, you know.
Right.
Because frankly, their life is full of other things
There's
too,
so much.
and we're so busy all the time.
Right.
But I think it comes down to, you know, nobody asks. You don't want to think about your parents having sex, your grandparents
Or your
having
children, maybe.
Yeah, you just don't think about those things. And why do we have this obsession in our Western world with
And needing to know?
with obsessing about what it is exactly that gay people do
Right.
in bed?
I
And
think the reason why is because they like to show what straight people do. You know, it's all over. It's everywhere. It's what drives media and business and all of it. And so I think that's why.
And it's just so simple because in the end it comes down to whether you're married and straight or you're a gay couple. In the end, your intimacy is something you negotiate with one another.
Right.
Because it's about making the other person happy and being
just
playful
enjoying
and
each other.
having a connection, a human connection there.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, that's what I was.
Didn't know where that was going to go. I didn't know you were
That's
going
what
to come
I
up
would
with that one.
ask you. I think everything else you're so genuine and honest
and then you're just
about.
you're such a bad mom in here living with your boyfriend and everything. Now I don't know whether you're going to put this in the video.
I've lived with every one of my boyfriends. Excommunication.
Oh no.